Well, good morning. It's good to be with you again this morning. We are going to be talking about chapter 17 of the script. I think that you'll find it as beginning with the last chapter, and so it continues with this chapter, that Lewis, excuse me, talks about uh, the it's kind of more of a spiritual formation emphasis, a practical theology of sorts. Although I don't know if you'd want to use that word theology, but practical Christian living maybe would be a better way to describe it. And his insights here, I think, are really helpful, helpful to all of us. In this particular text, there are that that one of the biblical principles that he's getting at is the whole idea of moderation and in balance. So I have some texts here, excuse me, and I think that maybe you can appreciate them. So in any case, this is Ecclesiastes 3:1 through, and this particular text is a text that has to do with moderation of perspective, right? And so everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. So and so that's moderation. It's keeping things in perspective about how things come to us in life, and that we're not overly emphasizing, we're not being overly dramatic, we're not being that there are seasons to life, and so there's a principle of moderation there. Philippians 4:5 says, "Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand." So you're not. This is Philippians 4:5. You don't live in the world of extremes as you deal with people. That you're measured in how you respond to them. So and then I think Philippians 4:8 is helpful. This also gives us a sense of moderation and perspective. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And so these are things that you don't want to be moderate about, right? You want to be all about the truth and all about being honorable and things that are pure and lovely and so on. So Philippians 4:8, I think, is helpful. First Corinthians 10:23 says, "All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up." So there are any number of texts here, and if you would like, you can Google biblical passages on moderation, and there are many lists here that they can give you that I think will be helpful if moderation is an issue for you. And uh, guess what? It usually is an issue for all of us in some fashion or another. So maybe at the end I can give you a few more, and you can write those down as well. But I think that you'll find them to be helpful, and um, and and this is one of those texts that's just so easy. All kinds of biblical principles that we can consult to give us guidance about that. So before we get started, please make sure that you introduce yourself, if you would, here on, just say something about who you are here and now, but are here later, and you have a chance to make a comment. That would be really helpful. Not so much today, at least, but in the past, we've really been picking up our audience live, and I know that the comments help people who are in this series. So please feel free to do that. Copy and paste the address, share it with other people, because you can go a long ways before you find information as salient, as meaningful as what Lewis has to say. So I hope that you are blessed by it. So, turning to chapter 17 in the Screwtape Letters. And by the way, just to go back over and make sure, any of you who are joining us late, and if you haven't purchased this book but want to get it, my suggestion would be that you get the C.S. Lewis Screwtape Letters, and this particular edition also includes the Screwtape Proposes a Toast. You can see it there. And in addition to that, this preface, the 1961 preface, this preface is it's just outstanding. And I think that if it doesn't have that preface, you didn't get everything you need. It's just really an outstanding preface. So, it's a humanities lesson. Uh, so his ability to grasp art and literature, and how he explains the evolution of what we think we know about Satan through the arts is really uh, it's just very it's just, I can't say enough about it. It's just great. So, my dear Wormwood, the contemptuous way in which you spoke of gluttony as a means of catching in your last letter shows only your ignorance. One of the great achievements of the last 100 years has been to deaden the human conscience on that subject, so that by now you will hardly find a sermon preached or a conscience troubled about it in the whole length and breadth or the USA. This has largely been affected by concentrating all our efforts on gluttony of delicacy, not gluttony of excess. So there's a difference between those two. So a gluttony of delicacy means that you want something in a very specific way, that it's very particular, it's very special, and you want a lot of that. But it's not gluttony, a whole bunch of chocolate. It's gluttony of delicacy. You want only Ceres's chocolate, right? And if you can't get Ceres's chocolate only, everything's wrong with overstating it. But he's talking about how there is a fixation on certain kinds of things, and that fixation is a kind of gluttony. It doesn't mean there's a lot of that kind of thing, although it can. It just means that you want only that, and if you can't get just that, then somebody's responsible, and somebody is being uh, um, someone is being responsible, right? They're dropping the ball, etc. So I'll go on. Your patient's mother, as I learned from the dossier, and you might have learned from Glubose, is a good example. She would be astonished one day, I hope, will be, to learn that her whole life is enslaved to this kind of sensuality, which is quite concealed from her by the fact that the quantities involved are small. So it's a gluttony of a particular, not necessarily a gluttony of a lot of things. Glubose has this woman well in hand. Positive terror to hostesses and servants. She's always turning from what has been offered with a demure little sigh and a smile. Oh, please, please. All I want is a cup of tea. Weak, but not too weak. And the teeniest, weeniest bit of really crisp toast. So she is gluttonous for that particular effect in her experience with tea and toast, and very fussy. So, I have, I have known people that Christians that when they go to a restaurant, borrowing from this example here, where they are gluttonous about a particular kind of service, that the waiter or waitresses have to be highly, highly attentive. And if they don't get the attention, the exact kind of attention that they think they deserve, then they are really rude. A witness. So they are, to amplify the meaning of gluttonous, they are gluttonous for that kind of an experience. And they don't think like they're asking for much from their perspective, but they really are. You see, because what she wants is smaller and less costly than what has been set before her. She never recognizes as gluttony her determination to get what she wants, however troublesome it may be to others. I mean, surely we can think of people like this who are very discriminating in that kind of a way, and they are ravenous for that kind of experience um, at almost any cost. At the very moment of indulging her appetite, that she is practicing temperance. So even though she is actually being gluttonous in terms of her effect upon the people around her, she believes in her mind that she's really being very temperate. She just wants what she wants in a very particular way, and the entire world needs to stop in order for her to get what she wants. In a crowded restaurant, she gives a little scream at the plate which some waitress has set before her and says, "Oh, that's far, far too much. Take it away and bring me about a quarter of it." If challenged, she would say that she's doing this to avoid waste. In reality, she does it because the particular shade of delicacy to which we have enslaved her is offended by the sight of more food than she happens to want. So, this is one of the things that Lewis does so very, very well in his writing and in his analysis, is that he presents certain realities in a way that you think it's one thing, but in reality, it's the exact opposite. He's just really good at identifying the polarities, the that live in opposition to each other, and that of there's a kind of way in which we are what's the word I'm looking for, uh, in denial. So we're in denial about how we really are, and in fact, we present what we do with an idea that it's actually more noble and more good, but in reality, it's not that at all. We're in denial of what our real and true motivation is, how we're really wired, and things like that. So that's what's going on here. The real quiet, unobtrusive work, which Glubose has been, that Glubose is her particular demon, has been doing for years on this old woman can be gauged by the way in which her belly dominates her whole life. The woman is in what may be called the all I want, quote, state of mind. All she wants is a cup of tea properly made, or an egg properly boiled, or a slice of bread properly toasted. But she never finds any servant or any friend who can do these simple things properly, because her, quote, properly seals an insatiable demand for the exact and almost impossible palatial, palatal pleasures which she imagines she remembers from the past described by her as, quote, the days when you could get good servants, end quote, good waiters, good waitresses, but known to us as the days when her senses were pleased and she had pleasures of other kinds, which made her less dependent on those of the table. So Lewis is talking about a very specific kind of gluttony. And make no mistake, the other kind of gluttony is bad too, the gluttony of excess. And so he's really, the point he's making here is that when we think of gluttony, we only tend to think of the gluttony of excess. And there's all kinds of gluttony. I mean, and oftentimes gluttony of excess is predicated on covetousness, right? We want stuff that other people have, and so we have this insatiable hunger, have more and more and more, so that whoever dies with the most toys wins. So and so that's a kind of gluttony of not just food, but a gluttony of things, gluttony of status, gluttony of power, all those kinds of things. It comes from an insatiable appetite that you're never satisfied. You have to have more than what's really there. So there's a complete loss of balance and perspective, and in fact, it really becomes an idol. It's something that you rearrange much of the rest of your life in order to get, to have, to possess that particular kind of thing. And so food is like that, but so is the gluttony of appetite for other things as well. So that's the one kind of gluttony when it comes to the gluttony of excess. And so, I think it's helpful for us all to take a few minutes and to think clearly about, what are those things that I seem to spend an inordinate amount of time pursuing, that I fantasize about, that I want more of, and if I'm really honest, that it's out of balance, that it's not that it's not necessary, it's not healthy. So there are things that we need. There are things that we like that we do not need, that aren't necessarily bad to pursue, um, but that we should be willing to surrender if necessary. And then we really don't need, but we want in excess and to the detriment of other thif right? So sometimes somebody might describe that as an addiction or an obsession. So if a person has this need to appear to be highly successful, and they are gluttonous for the attention and the praise that would come from being highly successful, then usually what that means is that they compromise in an out of balance fashion other things in their life that's just really destructive. And so they may lose their family, they may lose their children, they may lose their health, they may lose their friends, any number of things they might lose in that thing that they are gluttonous for. So to reiterate, there are things that we need, that we must pursue in order to. There are things that we do not need, that we can pursue as long as they are not out of balance. I mean, another rabbit trail. This is one of the gray areas of capitalism. So some social justice people, for example, would say, if you don't need it, then you shouldn't be spending money on it. And so, and then, either take less money or give what you don't spend away. But very good view of how economics works. So, for example, if the 70 million self-proclaimed born-again Christians out of a population of 330 million here in the United States, 50 million all decided together to buy only what they need, right? In a capitalistic, well as a socialist economy, in that economy, it would utterly and completely collapse it, and it would throw tens of millions of people into abject poverty, because our economic system is built largely on not just what we need, but what people want. So if you don't buy what you eat, then those people don't sell their goods and services. And if they don't have goods and services, then they don't have any money. And if they don't have any money, then they don't have a job, and they can't survive. And then the money that they would be getting doesn't grow. So it's not going back into the economy. And so it cycles back around to the people who live according to what they need. But now even the things that they need are not possible, because there's a symbiotic relationship between the things that we produce that we need and things that we produce that we do not need. There is no clear break between the so when I hear people make those connections, they just don't understand economics. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand how capitalism grows money, and when money grows, then there are more for people than less. For all people than less. There is predatory capitalism. There is that. That is evil, right? And there are peaks and valleys to capitalism in that way. But for the most part, over the centuries, we have lived in the mean, the middle part, where it's basically healthy for most people. So I'm just rabbit trail because somebody listening to this may not agree initially with why I said we have to live. It's okay to live according and to buy and to pursue things that you need. And even need is a relative term. I mean, you should never be more terrified. You should never be more terrified than when a government tells you what you need and what you don't need. That when a group of bureaucrats, an oligarchy, in some office someplace or some office, sit down and decide uh, on a infinitesimal scale what people need and what they don't need. I mean, that's a terrifying thing, and something that we should never surrender. Because even for people who are concerned about justice for others, I'm telling you that will rob those people more. It will not help them. It will rob them more, right? It's counterintuitive than what you think. So it's okay to live according to what to pursue those things that we need legitimately: food, shelter, clothing, to be warm, all those kinds of things. I mean, I think for all humans, there's a basic element of what people need, and then it's okay to pursue things that you like, that you love, hobbies, all those kinds of things, as long as they are not out of balance and they are corrupting or destroying certain other areas of your life that are important and vital as well. Once you do that, then you cross over into a region of gluttonous living, of excess. And that excess damages and corrupts and harms other important parts of the world, of your world that you live in. So, meanwhile, the daily disappointment produces daily illness. So he's making a transition here. So this person says all that she wants is this. And if she can't get that very specific thing that she wants, and she's always disappointed that in that gluttonous way she can't get that very specific delicacy that she wants, he goes on to say, meanwhile, the daily disappointment of not getting that daily ill temper. Cooks give notice and friendships are cool because they've been embarrassed in a restaurant or whatever. If enemy introduces into her mind a faint suspicion that she is too interested in food, Glubos, this other demon, counters it by suggesting to her that she doesn't mind what she eats herself, but does like to have nice things for her boy, that is her son, that is the patient here. In fact, of course, her greed has been one of the chief sources of his domestic discomfort for many years. And so she rationalizes. They're, very specifically then, they're in a restaurant, they order what it is that they want. The order isn't per specifications, and so she gets angry about it. But then she begins thinking, well, maybe I'm just making too much of this. And then Glubos, the other demon, comes into her life and says, yeah, but this really isn't about you too. I mean, this is about your son and about you providing for him and making sure he gets what he is entitled to and what he deserves. And so if you're a good mother, you'll make sure that that's what really happens. Work. So sin breeds sin. Sin is perpetually pregnant. If you look at sin in terms of concentric circles, so sin, 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 every one of these concentric circles within it still more sin that it's ready to give birth to, every one of them. And so when we find ourselves in situations and circumstances where we're living in excess, and we begin to be convicted by it, don't be surprised if some rationalization comes to get you to think in such a way that you can justify on behalf of others why this thing is the way it is and why you should get what it is that you want. In fact, of course, her greed has been one of the chief sources of his domestic discomfort. So, in fact, even though she rationalizes that she wants this thing for him, he's embarrassed by it. He's humiliated and angry about why she does what she does and how she rationalizes it in that kind of a way. Now, your patient is his mother's son. While working your hardest, quite rightly, on other fronts, you must not neglect a little quiet infiltration and respect. Being a male, he's not so likely to be caught by the quote, all I want, end quote, camouflage. Males are best turned into gluttons with the help of their vanity. They ought to be made to think themselves very knowing about food, to PQ themselves on having found the only restaurant in town where steaks are really, quote, properly cooked. What begins as vanity can then be gradually turned into habit. So, and this is true of any sin that we have, the longer that we practice that sin, the more we work it into our life, the more of a habit it becomes. But however you approach it, the great thing is to bring him into the state in which the denial of any one indulgence, it matters not which, champagne or tea or cigarettes, puts him out. He's annoyed. He's been inconvenienced. So if he doesn't get whatever indulgence he wants, doesn't matter which indulgence it is, get him to feel as if he's been put out, as if he's been slighted, embarrassed. So I think that we've all taken people, we would recommend a restaurant to someone and we would say, hey, let's go here. They have great food. This particular thing is, and you go and it doesn't turn out the way you want it. And the service was not quite like what you thought it would be, and the food was not quite as tasty as you'd hoped for. So now you feel embarrassed, you feel put out, because it didn't live up to your billing. So you get angry. And so it puts him out. For then his charity, justice, and obedience are all at your mercy. Once you've got to get him to act vain, then his charity, justice, and obedience are all at your mercy. Mere excess in food is much less valuable than delicacy. So he's rounding back and he's doubling down on this. Mere excess in food, so a person who is committed to having excess food, that kind of a sin is less valuable than this of delicacy, of specificity, of demands in a particular way. Its chief use is a kind of artillery preparation for attacks on chastity. On that, as on every other subject, keep your man in a condition of false spirituality. Never let him notice the medical aspect. Keep him wondering what pride or lack of faith has delivered him into your hands when a simple inquiry into what he has been eating or drinking for the last 24 hours show him whence your ammunition comes, and thus enable him by very little abstinence to imperil your lines of communication. Him confused. If he must think of the medical side of chastity, feed him the grand line, which we have made the English humans believe, that physical exercise in excess and constant fatigue are especially favor virtue. How they can believe this in the face of the notorious lustfulness of sailors and soldiers may well be asked. So let's go back over this for a minute. So Louis, that this excess can be turned in a man's life in terms of his chastity, right? So I'm just going to go back over and read that again. Mere excess is less valuable than delicacy. Its chief use is a kind of artillery preparation for attacks on chastity. So, so you can use this mindset that comes from the excess of delicacy to attack this man's chastity. Remember, he's a single guy; he's not married. On that, as on every other subject, keep your man in a condition of false spirituality. Never let him notice the medical aspect, the biological element that's associated with that. Keep him wondering what pride or lack of faith has delivered him into your hands. Like, why am I having difficulty with my chastity? Keep him wondering. Excuse me. Let me. Keep him wondering what pride or lack of faith has delivered him into your hands. When a simple inquiry he has been eating or drinking for the last 24 hours, excuse me, would show him whence your ammunition comes, and thus enable him by very little abstinence to imperil your lines of communication. If he must think of the medical side of chastity, if he's got to think about the biology of his his appetite for something very specific, feed him the grand lie which you have made the English humans believe, that physical exercise in excess and consequent fatigue are especially favorable. In other words, if he's struggling with his chastity, this appetite that he has, then get him to believe that all he needs is more exercise, right? And if he gets more exercise, that will help him to control this excess, this delicate excess of appetite. And then he goes on to say how they can believe this in the face of the notorious lustfulness of sailors and soldiers may well be asked. In other words, these soldiers and sailors are exhausted all the time, but they're still lustful, excess of delicacy in terms of what they want. But we use the schoolmasters to put the story about men who are really interested in chastity as an excuse for games, and therefore recommended games as an aid to chastity. But this whole business is too low at the tail end of this letter. So for what it's worth, this last paragraph here, Lewis kind of adds on, and it's it's kind of a rabbit trail. And he even says that at the end, it's just, to unpack this thought is, it's going to take more time than what he has, so he's not going to unpack it here. But suffice to say, this last chapter has to do with excess of delicacy in terms of sexual desire, and that among men, this is particularly problematic. So we can just leave that there, I think, for right now. So as you can see, then chapter 17 is more about the very practical things as it relates to our everyday practical things as it relates to our spirituality. Number one. Number two, that Lewis is focusing here on the polarities. So you think it's this, but it's really that. You think it's this good thing, but it's really not. It's a bad thing. And so he gets you to see the alt side that's associated with how people experience their gluttony, that there is a difference between gluttony of excess and gluttony of delicacy. So next week we'll do chapter 18, and so I think that Lewis does go into more in the way of sexual temptation as it relates to humans, and you'll I'm sure find that to be very interesting and helpful. And he gave us a precursor in the last paragraph of this particular chapter here as well. So please make sure, if you think this was helpful, that you share it. I see there's another person here. If you could say who it is, that would be helpful to me. Make any comment if you can. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on the comments section too. I can address it the next time we meet this Thursday at 9. And hopefully we'll have some additional people, and those who could not be here today will listen. So hit the share, let other people know that we're here, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.